Welcome back, Fantasy Faithful. I'm Amber Storm, and we've got something a little different than our normal weekly standings update. The regular season is over. In preparation for the playoffs starting this week, we're going to take a look at the season and what's brought us to this point. There has been serious drama, a lot of cheering and crying, and some absolute chaos. We've got more insights than you've got Christmas presents under the tree. We'll cover it all. Coach Mon, take us through it.
Thanks, Amber. Let's start with looking at the four playoff teams. Looking at the standings across the season, you see a couple quick trends. Rice to the occasion held pretty steady in the playoff group, though he dropped from first to third in week 8 and was never able to climb back up the ladder. Unstoppa Joe and the Bayliers both started towards the bottom of the league but showed steady and consistent upward movement, supplanting Rice and both spending time in the top spot. Who Dat ended in the same position he started in, fourth, but definitely had several ups and downs across the season. Looking at the power rankings for these teams, some of the patterns reinforce what we see in the standings, while others could paint a different picture. Rice started at the top of the power rankings, then steeply dropping off at week 7. Unstoppa Joe and the Bayliers both climbed to the top-ranked slot later in the season. Who Dat started and ended in the middle of the power rankings. All of those things match what we saw in the standings this season. What is interesting to me, though, is examining the trends at the end of the regular season. From week 12 forward, both the Unstoppa Joes and Who Dat slid in the rankings, while the Bayliers stayed at the top and Rice climbed up some from the basement. Will these trends hold through the first week of the playoffs? That's yet to be seen, but something to consider. Digging slightly deeper, the running average points scored and the running average margin of victory tell me it's going to be an exciting week this week. While Unstoppa Joe and the Bayliers have significantly higher season average victory margin, Who Dat and Rice to the occasion being right around 0-point margin show they are scrappy. When you combine that with all four of these teams are averaging within 5 points of each other over the course of the season, I'm super excited to see these teams compete in the playoffs. Will Who Dat grab his second championship in 3 years? Will Unstoppa Joe finish the worst to first process for the first time since Jimmy's ULAC Avax squad did it in the COVID-shortened league of 2021? Will Rice crest 500 in the playoffs or potentially take home his first crown? I'm excited to find out.
Thanks, Mon. Awesome insight, but we all know that's not why our audience tunes in. We need some snark, some blatant innuendo, and some semi-relevant culture references. Let's start with the scoreboard, the firepower rankings. Unstoppa Joe led the league in total points with 1,663.16 and averaged 118.80 points per game, the highest in the league. This man wasn't just winning, he was dominating the scoreboard like he had cheat codes. You posted 3 weekly high scores and never had a single weekly low. That's the definition of offensive firepower. Certified Bayliers finished with 1,625.48 points, averaging 116.11 per game. But here's the magic. They faced the easiest schedule in the league with opponents averaging only 101.09 points per game and officially a wedding present from the league. The marriage power-up included avoiding teams on their best weeks. Rice to the occasion put up 1,592.14 points with an 11.372 average, but faced 1,613.90 points against 115.28 average. You scored well, but faced the third toughest schedule. That midseason collapse makes more sense when you realize you were facing murderer's row. Welcome into the studio for the first time this season, Felix. Nice of you to wear your least pressed suit. What do you think?
Thanks, Amber. I guess they couldn't afford to send me to another crapper just to talk about the poop in the league. Speaking of turds, Obi-Wan Jacoby really laid a big one. Finished dead last in scoring with only 1,286.20 points, averaging a pathetic 99.01 per game. That's not just bad. That's historically bad. You're the only team that didn't break 100 points per game. This is like showing up to a gunfight with a water pistol.
This season was also filled with streaks, both the glory and the pain. On the positive side, Unstoppa Joe's 6-week winning streak, weeks 4 to 9, was the longest of the season. 6 straight W's is the kind of dominance that makes grown men weep. Certified Bayliers had a 5-week winning streak, weeks 5 to 9, and closed the season with a 4-week winning streak, weeks 11 to 14. You had 2 legendary runs. Antonio's 3-week winning streak to close out the season was the redemption arc we didn't know we needed.
Antonio needed that redemption arc because he started the season with a 7-week losing streak, weeks 2 to 8. It was the longest in the league this season. 7 consecutive losses is the kind of pain that requires therapy and possibly medication. From 1-1 to 1-8, this man lived in absolute misery. The Green Bowl Packers developed their own kind of stink during a 6-week losing streak, weeks 8 to 13, to end the playoff hunt. It was catastrophic. That's not a slump. That's organizational failure. Saquon and Zoo also had 4-week losing streaks, while the Galveston Dolphin Sharks and Obi-Wan Jacoby each had 3-week losing streaks. Pain was distributed equally this season, Amber.
Now for the weekly awards brought to you by Sleeper, not because they paid for it, but because they handed out the awards every week. Who dominated the headlines? Which manager had most of these awards? Most Best Manager awards. Zoo won this award 3 times. You were the most efficient when you won. Certified Bailiers, also 3 times. Marriage equals efficiency, apparently.
Who was the best of the worst? Well, it depends if you track the desktop or mobile app awards. That's right, they're different, Amber. Anyway, for the most worst manager awards, yikes, Obi-Wan Jacoby, 3 times. The force was not strong with your lineup decisions, Green Bowl Packers, 3 times. Your management was as bad as your 6-game losing streak. Antonio Rangel, 3 times. You were historically bad at setting lineups during that 7-week skid.
Biggest blowouts. Unstoppa Joe, 3 times. You didn't just win, you destroyed opponents. Certified Bailiers, also 3 times. When you won, it was decisive.
Who scraped by with the narrowest victories? Houdat, 4 times. You won games by the skin of your teeth. Every week was a heart attack. Certified Bailiers, 3 times. Sometimes you dominated. Sometimes you just edged out the other guy.
Highest scorer awards? Felix. The Unstoppa Joes and Rice each won this award 3 times. These guys are offensive juggernauts. Houdat, Zoo, and Green Bowl Packers all had 2 times each.
Lowest scorer awards. Antonio Rangel and Zoo, 3 times each. You guys lived in the shitter so long you put up family photos. Obi-Wan Jacoby and Saquon each lost this award 2 times.
Overachiever. That is winning with below average scores. Unstoppa Joe, 4 times. You won games you had no business winning. Houdat, 3 times. The clutch king of winning ugly.
Below expectations award. Teams that lost despite good scores. Antonio Rangel and Zoo, 3 times each. You scored well and still lost. That's brutal.
The most efficient teams. Certified Bailiers, 3 times. You maximized every point. Zoo, 3 times. When you were good, you were efficient. Your other 2 wins must have been luck.
The least efficient teams? Green Bowl Packers, 3 times. Wasting points like it's your job. Antonio Rangel, 3 times. During that 7-week losing streak, you couldn't do anything right.
How did the drafted players actually perform? And which managers have bragging rights for their draft day genius? Well, Josh Allen topped the regular season points list like the absolute stud everyone expected him to be, with a slew of running backs and quarterbacks trailing behind him like backup dancers at a Beyoncé concert. But here's where it gets spicy. Only Houdat and Certified Bailiers were smart enough in the first round to draft players that actually finished in the top 10. Everyone else, you whiffed on your first rounders harder than the drunk guy hitting on Raquel at the bar last night. The rest of the top 10 players were drafted after the first round, which means most of you paid premium prices for mediocrity. Let's break down the top 10 by position because the numbers are wild. 5 quarterbacks made the top 10 this year. Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts? Yeah, we expected those kings to deliver. But can we talk about Patrick Mahomes sneaking into the top 10? After an entire previous season and offseason of people declaring him washed and fantasy irrelevant, this man said, "Hold my Super Bowl rings," and proceeded to ball out while everyone at KC is busy planning Taylor and Travis's wedding. The comeback energy is real, and frankly, it's sexy when someone proves the haters wrong. And the late round steals? Dak Prescott and Drake London were drafted in the 12th and 13th rounds, respectively, generating massive value for their teams. That's like finding a designer dress at a thrift store. Absolute genius scouting. 4 running backs cracked the top 10. Jahmyr Gibbs and Christian McCaffrey were expected to dominate. No surprises there. But Jonathan Taylor and Devon Achane also showed up and showed out. These weren't flukes. These were legitimate RB1s doing RB1 things all season long. Here's the wildest stat. Jackson Smith-Njigba is the only wide receiver in the top 10 this season. 1. That's not just impressive, that's absolutely bonkers. JSN proved he's worthy of elite receiver conversation, and honestly, I bet Sam Darnold is getting a huge Christmas gift from JSN this year because that connection was electric. This man single-handedly carried the wide receiver position into the top 10 like Atlas holding up the world. Speaking of domination, it's no secret why Unstoppa Joe is the top scoring team in the league. This man has 3 players in the top 10, the quarterback, the running back, and the wide receiver that have powered his team all season long. He's been laughing, talking shit, and backing it up with elite draft picks at every key position. That's not luck, that's dominance. Jose is out here playing fantasy football like it's a science experiment, and he's got the winning formula.
You know who wasn't on that top 10 list, Amber? Obi-Wan Jacoby and Antonio Rangel. Those two decided early they were going to suck this year by not drafting anyone that finished in the top 10. Not a single player. Every other team had at least one stud, but these two, they went 0 for everything like they were swinging at ghosts. You two started sucking early. But here's another interesting fact about Obi-Wan Jacoby, Antonio Rangel, along with the Green Bowl Packers. You three didn't draft any truly suck-ass players this year either. You know what that means? You're not bad enough to be interesting and not good enough to be relevant. Good job being truly mid. The definition of mediocrity. Now let's talk about the worst drafted players this season, because this list is tragic. With no one earning more than 19.3 points on your rosters, this list is truly the have-nots. They're the fantasy football equivalent of lukewarm coffee, disappointing, forgettable, and nobody wants it. There are 7. That's 7. Running backs on the worst players list this year. That's not a position group, that's a graveyard. There are also 2 wide receivers and a kicker rounding out the bottom feeders. 3 of these jokers didn't score a single point. 0. Nada. Nothing. They were literally roster cloggers taking up space like that one coworker who contributes nothing in meetings. Now, some of these were round 15 flyers that nobody expected anything from. Fine, we get it. You took a shot. But half of them were drafted in or before the 11th round. That's not a late round gamble. That's a legitimate investment that returned nothing. And leading this parade of pain, Joe Mixon in the 4th round. The 4th round! You spent a premium pick on a guy who gave you negative value. That's like buying a luxury car and it won't even start. But can we talk about who dat for a second? Because my guy, you had 3 players on this worst list. 3. 2 of them are Texans players, and 2 of them scored 0 points. Dude, too many homer picks this season for real. I get it, you love your Texans, but this is fantasy football, not a fan club. You can't just draft the entire Houston roster and expect it to work. That's not strategy. That's blind loyalty, and it cost you. And Amber, I have to call out Unstoppa Joe here because the audacity. You raved about his elite drafting, and yeah, he's got 3 top 10 players. Impressive. But really, this man drafted a kicker that scored 0 points. 0. That has to hurt. You spent a draft pick on a kicker thinking you were being smart, and then he gives you nothing. And your 13th round pick may be named Tank Bigsby, but your score is the only thing he shot holes in this year. How does it feel to draft a guy named Tank and get absolutely demolished by that decision?
That leads us back to the Players of the Week awards brought to you again by Sleeper. Because they generated the weekly awards, but hey, if they want to send us some cash, we're totally down. The Players of the Week, separating the studs and duds, Quarterback of the Week, rise to the occasion, 4 times. You had the QB spot locked down. Zoo, 3 times. QB was your strength. Running Back of the Week, Unstoppa Joe, 5 times. 5. Nobody touched your RB dominance. I guess that's what you get when you draft 6 running backs. Certified Baylors and Who Dat 3 times each. Wide Receiver of the Week, Unstoppa Joe, 3 times. That's pretty good, but the surprise here is Antonio Rangel, also 3 times. We weren't sure anyone on your team actually showed up to play. Saquon and Zoo, 2 times each. Tight End of the Week, Saquon, my Pinheiro, 5 times. Your tight ends were carrying you. Certified Baylors and Rice, 3 times each. Kicker of the Week, One name, rise to the occasion 4 times with the big D. I'll let you figure out if that's the city, his leg, or something else. Antonio Rangel, 3 times. Is this the only good player on your team? Defense of the week, certified Bailiers. You're the only one who didn't win this award. As good as you have been this season, everyone needs something to improve on.
Then there's the players you should have started because bench points only serve to generate your opponents laughing at you. Who Dat and Green Bowl Packers, 4 quarterback bench warmers each. You left 4 elite quarterback performances on your bench. How did you win any games? Antonio Rangel, 5 tight end bench warmers. 5 tight ends you didn't start who dominated. Your lineup decisions smelled as bad as your overall record. Obi-Wan Jacoby, 3 wide receiver and 3 defensive bench warmers. You consistently started the wrong players. Maybe you just got used to the smell.
There were also more story arcs than a season of the Kardashians. The Cinderella story. Certified Bailiers went from 10th place in week 1 to number 1 seed at 11-3. Marriage power up plus easiest schedule equals perfection.
The collapse. The Green Bowl Packers went from 5-2 to 5-8 with a 6-week losing streak. From playoff lock to consolation bracket faster than you can say, what the fuck happened?
The redemption. Antonio Rangel went from 1-7 with a 7-week losing streak to winning 4 of his last 6 games, from laughingstock to respectable. Then the dominator. Unstoppa Joe scored the most points, averaged the most per game, had a 6-week winning streak, and never posted a weekly low, the definition of excellence.
The underachiever. Zoo defined underachieving by scored the 6th most total points, but finished 5th and 9th. You had the firepower but couldn't win when it mattered. And lastly, the disaster. Obi-Wan Jacoby finished last in points scored, had the most worst manager awards, and lived in the bottom of efficiency rankings all season. This was a rough year. You stank it up so bad they named a stall after you.
The bottom line, the numbers tell the story. Some teams overachieved, some underperformed, and some rode the perfect storm of skill and luck to the top. The playoffs started this week, and I'll be watching every game with champagne in hand, ready to crown a champion. Will it be the Cinderella story Bailiers, the offensive juggernaut Unstoppa Joe, the resilient Rice, or the clutch performer Who Dat? Until next time, may your stats be impressive and your playoff performances even better. May your opponents play their worst performers and your victories larger than my, well, you know.